Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the plains where once again we are opening with a new litter of baby creatures. We actually had these way before the habitat was finished last week. You may have seen them in the final cinematics. These baby raccoons are adorable. I hope you're ready for a step up in expectations this week for my favourite enclosure so far, for a pack of coyotes. Today's plan will be somewhat removed from where we've set up our entrance area. I'm still saving space for the bison, so I'll be avoiding that and heading a little bit further north, away from my, let's be honest, prey species, as the coyote are quite a vocal predator, so I want to cause as little stress as possible for the rest of the animals. I'm using our current buildings to estimate the size of this habitat, which doesn't really mean anything as I'll be eyeballing it in the actual build, which can then go in any direction. This will be on 2 levels, with an embankment and a ramp just to make sure that there's access. The interesting part of this one will be the covered area, which might be easier to explain as it's happening, but it's based on a boarding kennels that I used to work at. There'll be a small veterinary centre for the local area, some hefty metal fences, and staff access, I don't know, somewhere. I'll figure that one out later. As always, before we jump into today's build, if you enjoyed today's video, you can leave a like, it is always appreciated. If you want to see more like this, or even unlike this, subscribe to get the quickest access. And remember to get your suggestions into the comments for names for our newest species, the coyotes. Now, this is a larger enclosure, so we will have more animals at any one time. So don't hold back, as we may keep more than just one male and one female. Last week I asked for names for our raccoons, and despite being sure the male would end up being called Rocket, we had a pair suggested that I just cannot split up. So our first male and female couple's naming will be Bonnie and Clyde. Thank you to Kaya for that suggestion, but I did also say that we may be able to have another, so our second female will henceforth be known as Bandit. Thank you, Lisa, for that one. And that rounds out our family of crafty mask-wearing critters. Thank you all for your suggestions. I look forward to seeing what we come up with for our danger doggos in today's video. Wonderful. Now that the fun has been had, let's get down to business. As I mentioned in the plan, the coyotes are a loud species of predator, probably known to a lot of prey species instinctually, especially in the States. So it seemed like a twisted bit of mental torture to have them too close to our current residence, yowling at all hours and smelling like fresh kills. Realistically, we've probably not gone far enough away. However, guests are very lazy, and even as far as we have it now, they don't like to venture out, so this is a bit of a compromise. One of the difficulties with moving so far away is not being able to use anything as a reference for scale. There have been a couple of times where I've expanded or shrunk the initial border plan in order to make something appropriate in size, and while this does end up being a larger than usual habitat, for this zoo at least, me being me, I cut down the traversable area significantly with rocks, plants and terrain changes, so it'll all balance out in the end for the 5 adults that we do have. Now, so far we have a very flat area to work with. We are at risk of replicating one of the less appealing traits of the Highland Reserve. With the exception of the badger habitat and then the alpaca right at the end, the whole zoo was completely flat. These are plains, so there's more excuse for some flat areas than there was in the Highlands. But I would like to introduce more dimensions than that where we can. This is a very small move in that direction, with a long and consistent embankment that does 2 things that I maybe should have thought about beforehand. It gives more character to the enclosure. This is something the Trondheim habitats had a lot of, thanks to the different landscapes that were available to us. But it also cuts the guest viewing off quite a bit. Now I could counter this with different pathing and viewing opportunities, but I feel that this actually represents real-world enclosures quite well. There are definitely places where you get a glimpse into indoor areas, maybe some backstage. But particularly for predatory species, oftentimes these are restricted access. I don't know if it's more common for predators, and I may have made that up. But certainly, a lot of zoos allow for a good amount of privacy. And when we have at least 5 of any species in a habitat, the chances of them all being right at the back are pretty slim. Now, this building is not particularly complicated, but I need a bit more time to go through it than I wanted to spend looking at an overhead drawing, so we can go into it in a bit more detail here. We'll have a main holding area that will have a nice observation window for the coyotes, that will double up as a prep area for food and as a veterinary procedure room. We've got some little additions coming for that I enjoyed putting together as well. There will be a corridor access across the back of the building for access into the indoor section of the habitat, which will be split into 2 kennels so that animals can be separated in the event of fighting or illness or rehabilitation. Lots of reasons to need the animals separate. We'll have gates on rails so that each area can be opened and closed by flicking a switch, which will be numbered inside the prep room to keep everything organised. And finally, the kennels will open out into an outdoor area that will also be blocked off with fences before entering the main habitat, so that the animals can socialise and be outside while maintenance or cleaning takes place, or to make sure they don't run off while trying to do checks. This is perhaps the most practical habitat I have built so far, on par with the snow leopards or the lynx in terms of realism, but more thought out and better executed, hopefully. The fencing itself was very nearly the pre-made fence pieces that are available in the game, but they look a little bit flimsy, and for some reason, I wanted this to look like a Jurassic Park enclosure. So I made all the fences myself with sturdy reinforcements that look tough. Sounds like a long day, I know. But the benefit of these types of fences is that they can be resized to any number of shapes relatively easily, which you'll see in a few places around the habitat. Now that I've said it, these fences and the electric sliding gates are very Jurassic Park. Put some Utah raptors in here and they wouldn't look out of place. Which would actually not be too far off as well as a swap. Not visually, of course, but the Utah raptor's more like the Jurassic Park velociraptor than, a real velociraptor, which was tiny. And much like the Jurassic Park raptors, coyotes are fast, good at jumping, can smell prey from great distances, and most significantly, can communicate using a range of different sounds. Now, I don't know what the evidence is for raptors' ability to communicate, especially not in the way that it's shown in the films, but it's not unimaginable when you look at species like coyotes. What's really interesting as well is that a small group of them can use lots of these different sounds to camouflage their number. Maybe camouflage isn't the right word there. They sound like a much bigger pack than they actually are. Maybe to scare off rival packs or bigger predators like mountain lions or, I suppose, people. The gate I made for this is very simple when you really get down to it. It's essentially a smaller fence piece in tracks that can slide across, which has also been wired up to the main building so that the keepers can open and close the gate from the safety of the observation window and not need to go in with Wiley and his family. Again, it looks sturdy, like it was built for something bigger. What does America have that's bigger? Bears, I suppose. I don't know why I seem to enjoy working on doors more than other bits. It just occurred to me it seems to be the thing that I highlight more than anything in my zoos. Like the roll-up door in the cowshed in the Highlands, or the shutters in the lynx cage, or all of the animal doors in the habitats here. I'm not complaining. I think they add a lot of character to a build. It's just an oddly specific thing to focus on. Of course, I had to do the same thing for the kennel access points. You can see here how the walls can be resized easily to fit and have a smaller door on the front. I mentioned last week about the raccoons being able to walk through the half-closed door and how it was surprising given the hitboxes for some animals. I also said I might have something to complain about this week. Well, as it turns out, I managed to fix the problem fairly easily, so I'm not as bothered by it anymore. However, the openings I made here for the coyotes to access the inside of the building were too small for their greedy hitboxes, which seems ridiculous. Almost as ridiculous as the chickens, not quite. I ended up putting bedding into the outer area of this small caged off section because I'd pretty much accepted that they wouldn't be able to go inside. As, well, to be honest, I had no intention of stripping the cage to make the hole bigger. But in the end, I did play around with it a little bit and managed to get it working by raising the support beam slightly. I guess the coyotes want to be able to high jump in the door frame and not get concussion. Still irritating and unnecessary, but far from the nightmare I was expecting. So this outdoor section is going to be covered. I figure it's a good idea to have an outdoor area that they can use in the rain and stay dry. Not that my roofing solution will help with that particularly well. You'll see what I mean by that in a second. I didn't want to make a proper constructed roof that's a continuation of the main building. It needed to be more ramshackle. Even though the fences are very industrial, prison grade styling. I've got this dark bamboo wall going around the closed off sections of the enclosure, which will eventually have a plaster support on the outside as well for security. But this look felt, it shouldn't work because it's Asian theming, but actually it feels like a very natural choice to have as a structural material. Anyway, I thought, as it's already in the walls, it could also be used as a roof for this small section. What I thought would be a quick and easy solution turned out to be the longest, most tedious part of this build, because I used individual bamboo pieces. Yeah. Once I got the first row in place, I then had to copy each one individually so that I could move them in a straight line, otherwise they moved at an awkward direction and then needed to be adjusted individually anyway. On top of that, the large concentration of building pieces in this area made making adjustments ever so slightly framey. Not enough to cause problems with the game, but just enough to misjudge how far things had been moved, so what should have been a quick job took the better part of an evening. I've spared you having to watch all of that, but even in 6x speed, it is kinda slow. Okay, now this is something I've done a couple of times, actually a couple of times in this episode, despite trying to be more conscious of it, and that is forgetting to hit record when I do something relevant. Yeah, I do little bits between recording here and there just to tidy things up, so there's not much point in OBS running at the same time, taking up processing power. But I've got to hit record when I work on the habitat. In this case, it's the enrichment items. Not the worst thing to miss off, as there's not much different to any of the other enclosures. But there's another one later that's a little bit bigger. Anyway, I added the beddings to the kennels, a couple of toys and some water bowls, and I've decided that, for the sake of staging, only one side will be in use for now, with the other closed with the keeper door open on the other side, so that it can be cleaning or something. I think that makes it look a bit more interesting and used the way it's meant to be. And as we have plenty of space, we might as well make use of it in as many ways as we can. Between the two kennels, there will be another chain link fence. This is so we can introduce new animals to the pack slowly. Let them get used to each other's scents and meet each other safely before we throw them into the mixer. It's a small touch, but it seems like something that would be used in a real zoo. And of course, having chain link instead of breeze blocks really helps to open up the space and make it feel less claustrophobic. Now, one thing you may pick up on between the dividing wall and the keeper doors is my next omission by stupidity. When I used to work in a boarding and rehoming kennel, the blocks were set up in a similar way to this, although with individual outdoor runs rather than shared spaces, and they were a lot smaller for single dogs, but they all had this coating, paint or some sort of lining that was less porous than the brick and could be easily cleaned, that covered the floors and about a foot or two of the walls. I've tried to replicate that here with plaster paneling, and this effectively just makes it really easy to hose down when there are, accidents or general cleaning. Breeze block is great and all, but there are lots of little gaps and cracks for stuff to hide and grow bacteria or fungus. And with a species that will put its tongue literally anywhere, better safe than sorry. Now, while I spend a minute making yet another door, let me tell you something interesting about the coyote's behaviour. Maybe this is something we should have come to expect, given that their cousins, the dogs, are so inquisitive and sociable. But did you know that coyotes are terrific friends with badgers? Without wanting to offend anyone, this is of course meaning the slightly uglier American badger rather than our beautiful red wall badgers here in the UK. But that makes sense, as coyotes are kind of like ugly wolves. They can be ugly friends forever. I'm just kidding. I'm sure someone thinks they're beautiful. Regardless, badgers and coyotes have been observed hunting together, with coyotes acting as the above ground threat and badgers taking the burrows. It's quite a crazy partnership, really. Like something out of an animated movie. Two unlikely friends working together to kill prairie dogs. Maybe not Disney, but you can see where I'm going with this. We're still in phase 1 of the build. You can see why this video is a bit longer than usual. Before we see the nice little summary of the building, there's just a couple more things to see. The first is a big mound in the back corner. This is not a natural formation. It's been added to give the animals somewhere to survey the area. I don't know if this is a universally canine fascination, but my dog loves to sit on the window ledge of my bedroom and look down over the neighbours' gardens, keeping an eye out for danger. Like a little superhero or vigilante. Well, I guess those are the same thing. Maybe the coyotes will appreciate it, maybe not. I've tried to encourage them to use the lower area as much as possible for the sake of the guests viewing, so it may never see use, but it all adds to the atmosphere in the end, doesn't it? The last part of phase 1 is the fences, of course. This was fairly straightforward as we already had the fence pieces made up. They just needed a little adjustment to the top to make them extra secure. Not that the coyotes will be climbing the walls, but who knows? The only troublesome area was the corner, but as I said, these fences are just straightforward to adjust and resize, so it actually looks really consistent and in keeping with the rest of the barriers. In terms of scale, we've ended up slightly bigger than planned, but considering how far we are from any reference points, it's not too bad. I maybe should have done the bison first, as it's made my life a little bit harder moving forwards, but I'll burn that bridge when we come to it. Interior decorating. We're into phase 2, finally. It only took 20 minutes. I hope you're still there. I think I've said this from the beginning, I prefer to have videos around the 20-minute mark total, but for some builds, there's just too much that's going into them to cut that much out. Hopefully you're enjoying the build though. There's a lot of different things going on, so I'd like to think that it's not too repetitive. I didn't want to overdo it with the interior, as it's an area that I'm still improving on, and while it can be very useful to clutter an area to make it look more interesting, I also think sometimes less is more. So this room is very clinical, fit for purpose. The plaster pieces are great for work surfaces and cabinets. Not so good for open cabinets, as the pieces are usually slightly the wrong size, but I have a suspicion that will be addressed in Planet Zoo 2. I'm using a keeper to make sure all the heights are roughly usable if that were possible. And it's a shame really, all this is missing is stuff, you know. This is a bit of a veterinary surgery sort of thing, so even a tray of implements would be a huge addition. Maybe there's mods for stuff like that. This has never been a game that I thought to use mods on, weirdly. You'd have thought it'd be the opposite, as there are so many interesting animals that could be added, but, well, I haven't even used all the animals in the official game yet, so there's no point adding more. Anyway, this room will kind of act as a local hub for other enclosures in the area, as it's a big and well-furnished room. I don't know that it would make sense to use as a veterinary centre for other species, as the smell would probably set off the coyotes, but I do like the idea of having my own utility areas like this dotted around. Perhaps I can expand on the existing staff buildings a little bit. You know, the way most people probably do it. And moving on. Any good examination room, of course, needs a stainless steel table, complete with raised edges to prevent fluids from leaking onto the floor, ridges to stop animals sliding around, and a drain in the centre for easy cleaning. I actually think I might be mixing up the table in the vets with the one in the groomers, but that's okay. We can do both. Wait until a coyote next needs an operation and see when it comes back out with a mohawk from head to tail. Now, one thing that I've made and forgot to record, I think this is the third time in this video, is a set of individual cages on wheels that can be used to move animals. These are the kind of thing you might see in a kennel in real life, or a vet perhaps, where animals can be kept for short periods while they're waiting for treatment. So they're quite small, no room for activities, but if you needed to inject a coyote to sedate it for an examination perhaps, it'd be easy to reach from at least one side. I did think about having these in other areas as well, as they might look good for general transport crates, but I was watching a video of the gorillas being moved from, this is a bit off track, but the old Bristol Zoo to the new Bristol Zoo project, which happened recently. And it jogged into my mind fairly quickly that it'd be much more appropriate to have those fully closed off to keep the stress levels to a minimum. Not to worry, mayhaps I will build something more fitting in the future. Those cages will be visible in a moment anyway. What I did include, however, were these little surgical trolleys for keeping equipment. It's all becoming very chrome, very sterile. And I also made some movable surgical lighting, which doesn't work at all. They're very simple and just add an extra touch of intrigue to the room. As I said, it would be nice to have some bits and bobs about. I thought about making a little fridge freezer as well, but I'm still exploring all the building items, and so far nothing really stands out as useful for that sort of thing. At last, we come to the outdoor decoration. As if I would leave without giving our weekly dose of rocks. Now I tried something a bit different here. I don't know if it was deliberate or an accident, so I'll only be taking credit if it looks good. I started off by using the orangey grassland rocks to match the scenery that we left off with in the armadillo habitat. There are plenty of areas where this can be added naturally without overdoing it, thankfully, so there's more than enough to make up for the last couple of episodes. Although, looking back, I did also use quite a lot in those habitats as well, which just feels like less because they were a lot smaller. And then, at a point in the lower section where the earth is a bit cracked open, there's a darker desert rock pushing up, or maybe exposed is a better way to put it. I'm not as caught up in my geology as I used to be, or ever was. I don't think I've ever been particularly knowledgeable in that area. Anyway, it adds a bit of contrast. Some variation to keep the habitat looking cool from all angles. I also used a lot of rocks to cover up the borders of the little pool enrichment, helped along with some reeds. I'm not sure if the coyotes actually use that thing. It says it's accessible, but I've never seen any of them enter it. For the foliage, I started with the key items, the cacti. Just feels natural in this deserty grassland to have them everywhere, along with some dry grasses and the occasional splash of colour from the odd bush. We also have these dead-looking, burnt-out black bushes that go quite well in these environments. It's a very thirsty landscape, despite the few areas of greenery and the permanent water source right next to it all. Well, there's not much else to talk through. I appreciate it's been a bit of a longer video today, so I'm happy that you all stuck around, and hopefully it's been worth it. Thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave your best coyote names in the comments. I hope you all have a great week once again, and I will see you again in the next one.